Welcome to Don't Fear the Weight podcast with your host Vicky Masita, bringing together science and personal experience.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Tiny Titan podcast. Why am I saying the Tiny Titan podcast? I don't know. I think it's because I'm too hot. It isn't the Tiny Titan podcast. I'm the Tiny Titan, but the podcast is Don't Fear the Weight. So thank you very much for joining myself again. My guest in the hot seat is one of my all-time favorite people in the entire world, and Scott has come on a number of occasions. He doesn't need any introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Dr. Scott Stevenson, how the devil are you, my man?
I'm good. I like the Tiny Titan podcast. That works too. Like,
do you think we should just have it as the Tiny Titan instead of Don't Fear the Weight?
It can be the subtitle. You can use a subtitle. That's fine. Don't Fear the Weight, the Tiny Titan podcast. That's
we can do
totally acceptable. Yeah.
I think I'm going to do that. I will make us a new what's it called? The thumbnail that goes on YouTube, and actually have it as that and say, as approved by Dr. Scott Stevenson.
There you go. SWS approved or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be good.
Yeah.
That could be good.
Yeah.
So tell me how you're doing. What have you been up to? Obviously, we catch up every now and again on our Messenger Instagram, but tell me what's new.
Well, it is hot. I'm in Florida. It's awesome. I love it. Let's see. I kind of covered this. I'm doing my podcast with Scott McNally, The Muscle Minds, and that's just basically him and I. We bring people on, and then we've got the Swoley Trinity podcast we've been doing for a while too. I just competed a few weeks ago, and I talked about that. Ironically enough, I went into the whole debacle. I'd end up being vitamin D deficient.
Wow,
which seems
really?
like it could be impossible.
Yeah,
being out in the sun of Florida, but somehow I managed it. And I'll save that. I know. I go on for like an hour. Like, I piece some things together. There is some mechanisms that are involved, and I'm actually gathering some more information. So I'll recompile that and reveal it on the Muscle Minds podcast. But I literally, the long and short of it was when I figured that out through blood work, and I took some vitamin D, like everything cleared. Like, my mind just like the vapors disappeared, and I could see clearly again.
Wow.
It was actually quite an acute effect.
I was going to say, you must be majorly deficient on vitamin D if that was the case. Were you deficient in anything else, like vitamin K, potassium, anything like that?
Nothing else that I knew. I mean, I just ran a basic CBC and a metabolic profile, and I had vitamin D and a PSA, and everything was fine. There was nothing that was unusual or out of ordinary. Everything was exactly as I would have expected, except for that.
How weird.
So, yeah, and I've got an Oura ring here now, and my Apple Watch. I'm working on my sleep. That's my big personal challenge right now, because my sleep has not been good. Some of it's from dieting down. Some of it's from the vitamin D, I think, possibly too. But
yeah.
So this is brand new. I've had this for less than 24 hours, and it's kind of weird.
Oh, okay. So it's the very first showing of a podcast now. This one is the Oura ring.
Yeah, I'm not married. I didn't run off to Vegas and get married. I put it on the pinky. So.
I'm finding it's very interesting. There's a lot of people who are using the Oura ring at the moment to track basically everything, because it is like that amazing, isn't it? Are you finding that there's a lot of difference between the Apple Watch and the Oura ring? Is there a lot of discrepancies?
I've got all of one night's comparison.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, last night, this is to tell you, I had 2 pretty good nights of sleep, and then last night, because of the intense pressure that you put on someone to podcast, I was just anxious all night long. No, it wasn't that. I tend to do like kind of catch up sleep. I've noticed I had 2 good nights, and last night actually I did have some REM sleep and some dreaming. The dreaming doesn't necessarily represent how much REM you had per se, but not a good night, I could tell. And the Apple Watch told me I had 0 minutes of deep sleep, like big goose egg, and the Oura told me I had 45. I'd have to go and look, but literally my readiness, they have various indices that they've come up with weighing the deep sleep and the REM, and they're absolutely horrible on both regards. Either way, it's like I'm in the shitter, I'm in the toilet, and I'm in the shitter, depending on whether you ask the Apple Watch or the Oura ring. So I'll be better, I'm sure, once I start figuring these things out. But I don't know. I had a Fitbit, and it's almost sort of a qualitative, subjective thing, and this is what really the validity and the accuracy of these are not anywhere near where they need to be able to make anything really of a diagnostic nature that's prescriptive per se. But mine is so bad and it does, and it always has tracked with how I feel, especially when I wake up. That it can tell me some things. It's sort of like you're on the right track. You know, it's just sort of backup information to tell me what I literally already know. But like one thing I've been able to tell, and this matches with what little I know about sleep physiology, is that when I get deep sleep, more deep sleep, I feel muscle soreness is less.
Yeah.
Specifically, yeah, inflammation tends to be less. So, I mean, I got zero. You literally can wake up and feel like, oh boy, like you slept on a bad bed or something like that.
Sure.
When I have, but it's the same bed, and it's the deep sleep that's buried there. So, I'm going to work on it. I'm going to use this and see what it does. I've been told you shouldn't wear these, and actually they say you shouldn't wear them if you're weight training because it'll tear up the surface. They're really meant for that, so it's not. But I even have a polar chest monitor, like top of the line, and I can't get a good heart rate measurement when I'm training.
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean those are used in. This is a research grade. This is as good as you can get, and it's just. I'll look down at my watch and it'll tell me, like, after I've done a muscle round for legs and fortitude training, that I've got a heart rate of 46. And I'm like, no, it's like at least 146.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I'm going to look at the heart rate variability and those sorts of things. I got at least a physiologically reasonable heart rate variability measurement from this.
Oh, that's
because I was getting them from my watch, and with both the Fitbit and the Apple Watch on my phone, that were basically telling me that I was like I had one step in the grave. Like the heart rate variability was so poor, like threes, like single digits.
Oh, wow.
And that's that's just like that's off the charts. Like that's almost impossible.
Yeah,
so I think I was 50.
Vitamin D deficient in Miami.
Yeah, like that's just ridiculous. So that just can't be. Like, there's just no way that it could be that bad. That would have to be someone literally who's on a number of probably pharmaceuticals that are adjusting heart rate, and someone in a hospital bed. You know, so. But this, I was a 57 last night, even during a horrible, and that's not a bad number. I think.
That's a pretty good one.
I literally just looked at it and kind of said, yeah, and I checked my memory, and I think that's a decent number for someone who's sleeping as poorly as I am. So I'm gathering info, but it's not. They haven't refined the science. I mean, there's only one good study out, and I haven't poured through that yet. I just picked this up because I'm just trying to do everything as I juggle a million other things, and I just knew this was a good tool, and so I'm gonna. And it's also just I mean, I can sort of write it off as like it's a professional investment, you know, because we just talked about it. So thank you. This is my tax write-off just because we brought it up on the podcast. So it's part of my job.
So you can use this as a reference. So that's absolutely fine.
Absolutely. Tiny Titan said it was okay to buy the Oura ring.
Exactly. Just for scientific purposes.
Yes. I'll tell my accountant. So
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've always said about these sleep ones, especially because my clients use their watches for their sleep tracking and that kind of thing. And the majority of the time, I literally just kind of say, do you know what? How are you actually feeling? Did you feel like you had a good night's sleep? And they're like, yeah, I slept fine. So it's like, okay, just fine. It's ignoring. Because in the sleep clinics, you know how we always do those studies with people who do sleep clinics and stuff? They've got pressures, pulses, little electrodes on the brain to measure their brain waves, activities, and that kind of thing. Can you honestly tell me that scientifically they've put that into a little Oura ring that you can wear on your pinky and have the same results?
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, a lot of that is proprietary information. I believe they don't want you to necessarily know what they're doing because there's underlying assumptions. And I haven't tried to dig. I probably would have to like maybe bribe someone to give me some of the baseline information. But you're right. They're absolutely missing out on things. There have to be some underlying assumptions that are not valid there. And there is one study that's just come out recently it's all over Reddit, and it's been, you know, it's basically referenced every time if you just Google like Oura ring and polysomnography, you'll find people referencing that study.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so there's just one out there, but it's not. But you're right. You're missing out on a ton of things, and that's exactly what I do. What you told you, I wake up and I sort of try to assess myself first and foremost before I unblind my knowledge to what the watch and everything else has told me. I want to know, And like I get up and I'm like, yep, I'm a wreck today. I feel awful. I'm gonna hang in there. I'm gonna jack the coffee and go for it. I'm gonna get a nap because I know I need to do that because I need to make up for what I'm missing as best I possibly can. And then I look, I'm like, and I've been getting pretty good confirmation. But yeah. So right now it's really just that. I haven't been able to guide much, but I mean, there's people criticize him, but Peter Attia is a physician who has a really nice podcast. Actually, he's phenomenal. I've told you about this on Instagram. Matthew Walker is a sleep scientist.
Yeah.
And he has a 3-part interview with him, which is it's the most informative thing I've actually come across online as far as all things sleep. Literally the effect of drugs on sleep, alcohol on sleep, sleep patterning, night shift work, which is just awful.
Just crap. Just don't be a shift worker.
I lived in Germany for a while in Nuremberg, and I worked at the AEG, which is General Allgemeine Elektrogesellschaft, which is just general, like GE, basically. We're making plastic pieces for washers and dryers, and they were on a 3-group swing shift, so 8-hour chunks for the 3 different shift workers, and they would shift every 2 weeks. And I'd see this one guy in particular, like on the train, like every 2 weeks. And he just looked like he was just like inching towards a grave. And it was just terrible to hear him. And he would just start to get used to it, and then they'd flip him around and move him forward 8 hours or back, whichever way it was. Just why are you doing that? It's like to kind of spread out the pain and suffering, but you're making it even worse in a certain way. So, because you can never adjust.
Of course, yeah.
So,
horrible.
Yeah. So hopefully I'll figure out, if there's something I can use. Because the reason I brought up Attia was that he has been able to document subtle, or so he says at least. I don't know, maybe he's got a conflict of interest, but subtle nuances in what he sees with the ring that he wouldn't have expected or that he doesn't notice. So like if he has like I think he said, I can't quote him directly, but if I recall correctly, it's like 1 or 2 drinks, no issues on his sleep. And then he might have, if he had 2 or 3 drinks, he wouldn't sense it necessarily when he woke up, but the ring would show it. And then late and in a pretty substantial way.
Oh, wow.
And then he might notice it later on. So it wasn't something that he would have expected or noticed it, but it's something that could accrue over time. So the ring was giving him some hints that he wouldn't have suspected. And I mean, it's sort of like if the ring tracks well in general, you find that, and then you start doing something, and we do tend to bamboozle ourselves to our own demise, to get us to come up with rationalizations for things we want to do. It's like, I'll just have another drink. And and you have 4 drinks, let's say, or whatever it is you might do. I'm going to just stay up and watch the extra movie or what have you. And then your ring tells you what you know, but you don't really want to admit.
Yeah.
That can be a nice sort of kind of adherence tool for getting you to stick to the health behaviors that you really at some deeper level know you should.
Definitely. It's like the very own cricket on your finger.
Yeah, I like that. Yes. That could be your model, the Jiminy Cricket.
The Jiminy Cricket. Let's make an Oura ring, but call it a Jiminy Cricket.
I like that.
That would
and
be
it's little with the tiny Titan idea. This would be perfect. Yeah. It'd have to be on the right?
Yeah, and you can keep it on your finger, or you could actually keep it close to your heart, like Jiminy Cricket was, because he was always in the top pocket.
Oh, there you go.
See, we're getting these things now. This is the reason why we talk, Scott, because we can come up with these amazing ideas.
People are going to steal them. You watch it. People are going to steal them.
I have to get on it like now.
I have. There's a thing called the Gym Buddy.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Magnet. I was doing that like 5 years ago.
Really?
I bought little round magnet. Yeah, and I used a magnet and I was sticking my phone on Jim and I'm like, this is going to be huge. I know it. And sure enough, now they have the Gym Buddy. Uh-oh.
Right.
Yeah, so I lost my chance there. So someone's going to take the Jiminy Cricket idea.
Right, well, we'll get on it. We'll get on it. Stuff the podcast. Right, thanks, guys, for listening.
Right, bye.
Let's
start trademarking.
That's it. It's funny, isn't it? Right. Well, as we always do, we go off on a tangent, and that's great. And I'm glad that we go. But the reason why we brought you on here today is just to kind of clarify a couple of things that are swimming in the bodybuilding industry at the moment, which is all about nutrient timing and peri-workout meal timing. And one of the things that we were talking about, which we'll really highlight into it, is fats. So fats are getting a bad rap, and they're classed as the devil post-workout, and that you should never have them post-workout because of all of the glycogen that you depleted, bro, and that you need to obviously get all of the glycogen back up. So let's kind of delve into your opinion and your research into peri-workout meal timing, but specifically focusing on fats pre and post-workout.
So did you throw bro in there in the middle of that sentence somewhere? Did I hear that? Okay, just making sure we know who we're talking to here. Okay, good. So that first of all, you kind of have to analyze. That's a generalized sort of like, I don't want to say, I don't mean this in a derogatory, but kind of the peanut gallery, social media meme sort of oriented opinion. And a lot of those folks are like people have always been, to large part, trying to lose body fat.
Sure.
So in that context, you're looking at how to get the most satisfaction out of the food that you eat and keep your calories low. Fats obviously have that issue in that they're more calorically dense and they're less satiating than other forms of the other macros. So we can almost take that to mean that this is in the context of someone who's dieting down. Okay. So in that context, then that person is probably if and this is actually a huge issue. Some people just simply, and this is just a global thing, don't want to have their food while they're training because you can't enjoy it. Mm. You're not like you're drinking your calories and you're getting it down. Whether or not there's a performance or a body comp type of effect there to be had, they would much rather sit down and enjoy their food and have it spiced up, or maybe cook it and go through the ritual and all those sorts of things. And I totally get that. So that makes sense. So there's that impact. So I think the first thing is, if you think about, and this is what we talked about before already, just so I know we're going to go into this, is the idea of having fats before you train. Yeah. To prevent hypoglycemia. And that's something my good buddy John Meadows does. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, unless, for instance, you're very, very low in calories and you're just simply adding in fats to have a delayed gastric emptying effect. Yeah. That's sort of a wasteful use of those yummy calories. John will use like almond butter. That's kind of a standard. And it's like that tablespoon of almond butter, like when I'm in the mode of getting ready to go into the gym, I can't really sit and enjoy the taste of that yummy almond butter when I'm trying to like gear myself up to go and kick butt in the weight room. So that is one reason why people might not want to do that. But there is definitely an effect. Fats, simply because they're absorbed less slowly, will slow down gastric absorption or get gastric motility and movement and absorption into the small intestine. Yeah. So they do that. That really does indeed happen. So if you take in 50 grams of carbs with 20 grams of fat, you're going to have a slow release of carbohydrate and glucose into the bloodstream. It lowers the glycemic index. All that's absolutely true. But you can also simply drink your carbs more slowly and meter them in by how fast you drink them. Yeah. It will have the same effect. And that's what I tend to have people do. It makes for a simple accounting. Basically, you're like, okay, these are my carbs. These are the calories I'm getting. I'm not mixing. I only have to really deal with protein and carbs as opposed to protein, fat, and carbs. So it's an easier counting thing to try to do. So that's what I think makes just as much sense. Now, if you're someone who's not trying to diet down and you want to put more calories in, well, then you can add those fats in there, and you could possibly do that. One of the disadvantages, I'm going to play a devil's advocate here a little bit. Like, let's imagine that for whatever reason you do end up becoming hypoglycemic. You start to feel a little wonky and maybe sweaty, and your sympathetic nervous system's cranking, and you're not able to bring your blood sugar back up. If you've got fats, I really doubt this is going to be an issue, but if you've got fats in there that disallow rapid emptying of glucose that you've just drank or taken in, then you're not going to be able to remedy your hypoglycemia very rapidly. You've literally it's kind of like you've locked your car into that slow metered glucose train, And if you can't make an abrupt change in glucose because you've got those fats in your GI system, that's fine if you just want to go down that straight line, but you've lost some adjustment, some ability to adjust things. So that's really the simple answer to that quandary, is that, yeah, you've got two ways you can do it. You can use fats, and then you basically force the GI system to only have slow entry of glucose and metered, or you can simply adjust that by just drinking your drink all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it works just as well. Yeah.
So would it particularly matter then if somebody would have, say, the best of both worlds? So say that they have their 50 grams of carbs, their 20 grams of fat pre-workout, but then they also have an additional 20 grams of carbohydrate intra-workout. Would you actually, as in forms of like cyclic dextrin or something, would you say that that would be an additional, or just basically a waste of those calories that you're doing all both of those things?
I think it makes sense literally just to drink your drink during your workout, to be honest. I mean, like, if you could, if you want, this is not how I would do it. You could just drink those. You'd have some protein there too, of course. So don't forget, maybe 25 grams of protein. You could drink it all beforehand and then sort of have a full belly and then hope that it all kind of meters its way in. I think it makes more sense just to drink it throughout. You're going to be drinking anyway.
Sure.
We know from the endurance exercise literature that people, especially if they're exercising in the heat, which is an issue here, maybe not so much there, but that it's more palatable to have flavored fluids, so people will drink more.
Yeah.
So what I will typically do, like one easy strategy, and I sometimes have very big intra-workouts, so I mean, I have them up to 1,000 calories sometimes if I'm trying to add calories particularly, but I'll have everything mixed into a large jug. I've got, I think it's on the other side of the room, I've got a big, like 48-ounce shaker bottle, so it's fairly large.
Yeah, it's as big as a gym bag.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's as big as you. If we the Tiny Titan and the shaker bottle are about the same height.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, exactly.
And I'll have some ice in there to keep it cool, and then I'll just add water as I go throughout. So I'll almost front load, you could say, the carbohydrates through that gets it. There is still some gastric delay. It doesn't go straight through. Mm-hmm. And then I add water to that, and it becomes more dilute as I tend to get thirsty and I've sweated more and I start to maybe lose some fluid. And then by the time I'm near my end of my workout, I have some small amount of that left. I kind of know how much I need to refill that because I've been doing this for a while. And then I have that drink on the way home, and I'm good to go. And that works really well. So it's a way to meter the carbs all the way through. Especially if you're taking a big inter-workout, it'd be silly to like take a 500 calorie inter-workout right before you train, especially if you're going to train for an hour and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you actually have any solid food then before that? You would just literally just have that drink? So
there's all sorts of different scenarios here, but one of the things, and this is, the whole thing is an unnatural act. As I probably said previously, we're picking up things and putting them down repeatedly to produce a muscular callus. That's kind of a bizarre way of sort of biohacking our genes to make muscles grow, because that's a weird thing to do. And we're also eating while we're exercising. And so you're turning on your sympathetic nervous system, and at the same time asking your system to do something that's primarily parasympathetically driven.
Rest and digest.
Yes, rest and digest, So rest, repose, and you're basically trying to go forwards and backwards at the same time in terms of the autonomic nervous system. You're activating both at once. So that's why people will have highly branched cyclic dextrin, because the molecular weight allows for more rapid absorption there. It's easier on the gut. It doesn't pull as much water in.
Sure.
As an aside, I have a client who's been dieting now, and she's using dextrose, which is totally fine. Dextrose tends to bloat, but she's hungry. This is actually a good thing. It creates some gastric distension for her, which rids her of the hunger. One of the signals for appetite, one of the signals that inhibits appetite, is having more food in your stomach.
Sure.
So dextrose can actually be your friend in the off season when you're trying to put in more food and you've maybe just eaten. You don't want dextrose bloating you during a workout, but if you're dieting down and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to start training because it can distract me from this hunger, then you can use dextrose. And dextrose, you want to adjust slowly into it because it can bloat and not be so good, but it actually can be your friend that it will pull more water in with it per unit glucose. That's that parasympathetic sympathetic antagonism is also why people use hydrolyzed proteins as well. So hydrolyzed whey, Pepto-Pros is the super pricey one.
Yeah, and it tastes like ass as well.
Yeah, it can be a little bit bitter. Yeah.
I love how you're so much more diplomatic than I am. I'm like, yeah, ass, and you're like, yeah, it's a bit bitter.
I just swallow. I mean, I don't care. I just drink whatever. Citrus flavors work best for that kind of stuff, for EAAs and the hydrolyzed. So yeah, lemon, lime, kind of raspberry lime flavors, those work really well.
I'll keep that in mind. Definitely keep that. I'm not a big intra-workout drinker personally. I'm one of those people who I just really like eating my food, waiting a little bit, and then obviously going into the gym, because I did find that having highly branched cyclic dextrin along with Pepto-Pro or even just EAAs throughout my training session, I found that I was really kind of like acidy, heartburny, maybe sometimes even bloated. So I just decided, you know what, it just isn't for me, that intra-workout.
Yeah, the thing really, if you've eaten, you'll be you will not be postprandial. Like, you will literally have that food entering into your system for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, depending on the size of the meal.
Yeah.
So you're not really fasted. You've still got some incoming nutrients from a previously eaten meal. So it's really okay. Like, we can sort of like call this whole situation, this whole conversation null and void if you've eaten a good meal 2 hours beforehand. And you're not trying to train for like 3 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a different scenario, for instance, during endurance exercise, where you can have more carbohydrate being oxidized because of the rate of energy expenditure is really not as high, even during like maximal endurance exercise. So you can supplant some of the fat that you would use with carbohydrate, which allows you to exercise a little bit higher intensity. So you have an ergogenic effect by drinking carbohydrate during your workout. So the value used to be like 60 grams per hour, like a gram of glucose, but now it's a little bit higher. You can actually use multiple forms that had some fructose or sucrose in there. And because the gastrointestinal system has different transports, you can actually get up to like 80 or 90. You probably know about some of it. You're nodding your head like you've heard all this.
Yeah, no, that's good. I love it.
Yeah, and that very same Joikendrup is the name of the researcher who's really kind of pioneered a lot of that. Jeukendrup. He's actually shown too, and this applies to you, that there is some adaptation in the GI that will happen if you slowly start adding in carbohydrates, at least in endurance exercise. And I've absolutely seen this in clients. I've had people start off and they're like, oh my God, there's just no way I can do this. And these are in situations where literally someone wakes up and they have to get right to the gym. There's no time for a big meal with some space in between. So we really wanted to like give it a good go. And they start off on like, this is just not working. I just don't feel good. It's like, it's okay. We'll start with like 10 grams of EAAs. And you can even show a shift in protein synthesis with just like 6 grams of EAAs. That's like nothing. That's a very, very small amount. And some carbohydrate, and gradually add that in. Your GI you'll get used to it. Some of it may be here, some of it may be in the GI itself. Imagine it's probably both. Yeah, and I had one client who was just on a budget, and he just used dextrose and whey concentrate in large amounts, and he was okay with it. He worked his way up. Like, we're talking like 50, 60 grams of whey concentrate and 150 grams of dextrose. Yeah. He was a big guy. He's a bodybuilder going for a pro card. And he just just trying to make ends meet, and that was the cheap way to do it. He was just trying to save every nickel and dime he could. But he had to adjust to that, and you can get used to that. And I've told the story multiple. I mean, at one point I was taking in. I just wanted to see if I could do it. Years ago, when I was playing with this, and I was able to work up to 2,000 calories in an intra workout. Yeah, so that's like your entire day's worth of food.
Oh no, I have a little bit more than that. But
okay. That's right. I forget who I'm talking to. Yes.
Yeah, it is me.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, it is. In fact, it's more than the majority of, or a lot of people, especially us dirty natties. a lot of people's entire day's caloric allowance, and you're just having that intra workout. I mean, that's crazy.
That was a while ago, and it was when I was eating 6,000 calories a day. But I literally was using that as a way. This is the opposite side of the coin. We'll come back to the fats in the dieting situation, but I was using that as a way to get those calories in and literally multitask. So if I've got a 16-hour day, I'm sleeping 8, I'm up 16, and I've got 6,000 calories to get in, and I can wake up and have 1,000-calorie meal, have another 1,000-calorie meal, and then be productive and do some other work, and then manage to fit 2,000 calories in at the same time I'm training. Well, then I don't have to have a post-training meal.
That's true.
I've got 2,000 calories.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I can
tomorrow.
Oh yeah, exactly. I can wait, 3 or 4 hours, and then I have my next, and then I can put my last 2 meals a day at 1,000 calories and get the $6,000 that I was shooting for.
Sure.
So that seems to help a lot of people because literally, you don't want to eat eating an hour before. It sets everything into the opposite direction autonomically from where you want to be when you're training. But you seem to be able to skirt that if you start taking an intra workout, like literally as you get to the gym and you're starting to warm up and slowly move in that direction. And assuming you've adapted to whatever it is you're drinking and it's a good formula for you and that sort of thing. So it's a way to literally multitask and bring calories in while you're training and fit a meal in during that time, where otherwise you'd have to have an hour beforehand after your last meal. And then there's always some gastric delay too, in that when, let's say you have your post-workout meal right when you finished, and that may be an hour and a half after you finish training your first muscle group.
Wow, yeah, of course.
So that's another timing thing that I point out continually that I think is probably important, is like if you train chest, shoulders, and triceps and do abs and maybe some warm down cardio, your chest training could have been an hour and a half before you actually start your post-workout meal. And there's some gastric delay. It could be 2 hours. You would never wait 2 hours intentionally to have your first post-workout meal. But you are doing that essentially because of the order of exercises that most people would follow in terms of prioritizing the bigger muscle groups, more important ones. So that's an advantage.
Starting off the recovery process at the end of the day, as soon as you start breaking the muscle down.
In fact, you're countering it during the workout.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
In a certain sense, there's some possibility that, like, for instance, you won't find in people that have consumed carbohydrate while they're training that you'll get the same upregulation and enzymes of fatty acid oxidation. Yeah. Because you're disallowing that fatty acid oxidation during the exercise. So I mean, there's some possibilities that you're adjusting the adaptation to some degree, but yeah, you're basically blunting breakdown.
Right.
With the insulin. You're keeping your glycogen levels from dropping because you can actually replenish glycogen during your rest intervals.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're recovering, and when people are in a dieted down situation in the gym, let's say you're someone who's going to do 8 sets, 8 hard working sets for a muscle group in a given day, and you are literally you're a month out from a show, your glycogen levels are low. And those last 3 sets, you'd be getting the bonk. There's no pump. You get to that 7th or 8th rep, and you feel like, I've got 3 or 4 more, and all of a sudden, just like, hey, what happened? Why are you stopping on me? Yeah. That can be a lack of glycogen. But you can, and I've seen this repeatedly, you can actually make a couple more of those sets productive by having some carbohydrate during that period during your workout. You won't bonk as hard. So if you timed it then, so let's say you got 100 grams of carbs you're going to get during that day, putting 50 of those there might make that a more productive workout in that regard. And that's a tough thing to study.
It's a hard thing to actually swallow as well, especially if you are on only 100 grams of carbs a day and you want 50 of it to drink rather than actually sit down and enjoy. That's a hard thing to swallow for anybody.
Yeah, unless of course you're literally so hungry that that you're going to train better, and you remedy that hunger with the intra-workout drink.
That's true. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I that's been happening when I've dieted this past time and in the past month or so. Literally, I'll wake up and I'll just have protein only in the mornings, and then And then I'll go in and I'm hungry by the time I'm ready for my workout. I got my drink ready, and I'm thinking, I'm very happy to have this drink because it takes the edge off that hunger, and it's going to make me train more productively. Simply because I'm not thinking, God, I can't wait to finish this workout so I can eat.
Sure.
It literally helps in that regard. So it's not like, oh, shoot, I'm wasting my calories on this drink, especially in my case because I have lots of food after my workout too. So it's not, I know I'm going to get plenty of food thereafter, and that's the way I structure things nutrient timing-wise.
Yeah.
So we went off on a major tangent there, but
I love it. We do this all the time. This is why it's so good.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into then the post-workout. So we've done the pre-workout, and we've talked about fats and whether or not it's a great idea or not, and then we've done your intra-workout. So let's talk about post-workout, because you have an enormous amount of food post-workout. I can vouch for that because we had an amazing post-workout dinner at the airport after we trained muscle rounds. Oh, actually, before we go into post-workout, let's actually just discuss that last little bit for the intra-workout, if that's all right. Obviously, with Fortitude Training, there are different ways and means that you go into the gym, and you can either do some heavy sets with lower reps, you go in and do some volume work, which are your pump sets, and then you can also do muscle rounds. So you have 3 different types of workouts that you can do in Fortitude Training. When it comes to your intra-workout carbs, would you actually change the amount of carbohydrates based on the type of training you're doing? So say you're doing the heavy load, lower rep sets. Would you have as much intra-workout carbohydrates as you would do for, say, muscle rounds or your 20 to 30 rep sets, which are disgusting, by the way? I did one of them the other day. But yeah, so would you actually change your intra-workout based on those?
The way I've kind of set up the program on the whole, you're right. There are differences in the different set types that would sort of suggest maybe you might, if you were just doing those sets, let's say you're just using comparing the pump sets with the loading sets, you're going to use more glycogen probably on the pump set, so you might have more carbs. But the thing is, the way Fortitude Training is structured across the week is that the volume of training for a given volume tier is just about the same. So the day you do loading sets for legs, which you'd think, that's not going to require as much carbohydrate as the pump sets on the day you do that, you're doing pump sets for the upper body.
Right, yeah.
So that's a full body workout. So there's 2 full body workouts, and then if you do one of the versions, you're doing actually 4 body workout, 4 full body workouts during the week. So you could perhaps nitpick, and I've told people if they want to do Fortitude Training, I've set up these different volume tiers. And the easiest way to start is just to pick a volume tier and kind of follow that through the week. And, don't just willy-nilly jump all around, get an idea of how a given tier affects you, but then to start applying your auto-regulation, and you can change volume tiers, and that can happen during the week. It could be you do one volume tier and like, you know what, I'm coming back from my days of muscle rounds. I need to drop the volume on that day. And in that case, if you're really trying to like fine tune your caloric intake, you might have smaller intra workouts on those days. And there can be a scenario where someone, just because of how the pump sets are auto-regulated. So you're a masochist. We know that. That's clear. It's the evidence is all over your Instagram. You want those pump sets are self-selected in terms of how you do them. So some people, everyone knows Jordan Peters there. Jordan, at one point in time, and I think he would do things differently now, but he would just do like a 15 rep set as a pump set, and that kind of falls into the range. That's well within sort of the parameters of a pump set. But other people would do the 5s into the hole.
Oh yeah,
that's like horrible. Extending the set out. It's like this 60, 90-second set, and those are going to differ obviously depending on the glycogen and how much effort and the inroads that you get into your recovery. So some people might find when they're doing the first 2 days of a weekly Fortitude Training, the standard schedule, that like those days are just like diabolical for them, and they have to go with a lower volume tier because the pump sets are the hardest thing that they do, whereas they can go to a higher volume tier the way they do the muscle rounds.
Yeah.
And I can go on and on. These principles would fit, other programs too, depending on how someone cycles their training through the week. If they're doing kind of an undulating periodization scheme, But the muscle rounds too can be done differently. The way I set those up is you could, if you'd like to train heavier, you could pick loads where you fail earlier in the muscle round.
Yeah.
And then so that's going to have a different effect than if you're someone who likes to like literally use a lighter load and like have a higher rep count total for the muscle round, because you're into that last part of the muscle round, and you might be getting 6 or 7 reps on average. You're trying to keep yourself in that spot moving forward, of course, with the weight. So there could be some fine, but I think that's like, it's fapping, so to speak, to like kind of like 5 to 10 grams difference, blah blah blah. Now if you're on a program where you're training legs one day and then you've got a biceps, forearms, and calves day, you don't need the 500 grams of carbs you have on your leg day on that day that you're training arms and calves.
Oh, but surely you do, bro. Surely you do, bro.
Yeah. Well, but you could if those are your weak muscle groups.
For sure. And what about if you were a weaker muscle group that you wanted to bring up? So say like a load of people, I have a very, very good friend who has weak arms. His arms are just his weak point. So would he benefit more from having more intra-workout carbs based on his arm day?
I think that's absolutely. Because if he's got in a situation where his calories are going to be on average, let's say 4,000.
Yeah.
And that's just where he is to ensure he's making good weight gain and good progress. And his legs are awesome. He could like literally starve on leg day, and his legs are never going to shrink, and they're always going to look great. And so he's not worried about bringing those up. But his arms are just, for whatever reason, they're just twigs. He's sort of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. He has these little spindly arms and gigantic legs. He would be someone who would, because you're looking at sort of total caloric intake over the course of the week, he can literally put a lot of his food around that when he's training that weak muscle group. And it would make perfect sense. So one strategy, of course, is to make sure he feels good. So if you're dieting down, especially, you would have more food that day to kind of pull yourself out of that diet haze, so you can train really hard, and then more food thereafter for recovery.
Absolutely.
So that would be one way to really prioritize your nutrition. And that's a nutrient timing principle. It's not on an hourly basis throughout the day. It's on a weekly basis, or it's literally on a sort of a training cycle split basis, in that you're putting your food around the weak muscle group in order to bring that up. So yeah, that's a really good question.
It's very interesting as well. I do enjoy those kind of undulating, because a lot of people just kind of use the word, but poo-poo nutrition and poo-poo nutrient timing, and that goes across the board for bodybuilders, powerlifters, crossfitters, you name it. They all do it, and it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous, because bottom line is, even though you're a bodybuilder, people don't class themselves as performance athletes, but they still have to perform in the gym. And in order to bring up weaker body parts, you might as well obviously prioritize that weaker body part by undulating your training as well as undulating your nutrients. So it just strikes me as weird. But anyway, right. So moving on.
That's a really good point, and one I've got a whole other talk that I've put together, and on the Swoley Trinity podcast, not this last one, before we had Brad Schoenfeld on.
Yeah.
And kind of, I think it made it through. We had some technical issues, so I'm not sure what. I think everything got out into the podcast, but one of the things that I've been able to kind of glean, there are data to suggest this, and it makes perfect sense, is that literally, to a large extent, form follows function. We're using the weight training to produce muscle mass, and with the underlying assumption, and people have actually argued this, but against this, but you do see in the studies that have correlated these things an association between strength gain and muscle mass gain over the long haul. So bodybuilders are not performance athletes, in that our performance isn't evaluated like on the stage, unless you're a fitness competitor, at least not these days. We don't do those things like that used to back in the old day. But if you take, as long as your weight is going up, generally speaking, and you take someone who's curling 95 pounds for 10 reps, you can get them to where they're curling 135 pounds for 10 reps. That's going to manifest in their arms. It will vary to some degree, but they're going to get bigger arm size, assuming they've been training somewhere beforehand and it's not mainly a neurological type of thing. So if you can, like, performance in the gym, progressive overload it's a thing. It's really a thing. It has something to do with both the muscle size and the muscle strength, and those things move along in tandem with one another, without a doubt. So you're absolutely right. I mean, if it didn't matter, you just kind of go in the gym and you just kind of like press the button on the training button, and then things would kind of happen. Then you just wouldn't care at all. You could just like have all your protein on Sundays and have nothing the rest of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just have one giant feast over the weekends, and then you just do intermittent fasting, like weekday fasting for 5 days, and then gorge yourself on the weekend. So
that's what most general population clients do, though, isn't it? I'm really good Monday to Friday, and then I basically say, fuck it, Saturday, Sunday.
some do that, yes.
Funny. Okay, so let's get into then post-workout. So let's do post-workout. Yep. Should you have fats post-workout? What do you do post-workout, and what would you realistically put towards your clients as well?
So the crux kind of that issue, and this is in my Fortitude Training books, I looked into this and dug up everything I could find, is that after the workout, you're insulin sensitized. Sure. So there's an insulin-like effect of contraction. If you reduce glycogen levels, so that's going to set the muscle up to take in carbohydrate preferentially. And although generally speaking, elevated blood fatty acids and triglycerides, that does tend to limit and reduce insulin sensitivity. In that context, post-workout, especially if your glycogen levels have been lowered substantially, and they can definitely be. I mean, if you're just doing 2 sets, it's not going to change much. But if you're training substantially, you can drop glycogen levels by a good bit. The fat in your food is not going to impair glycogen restoration. It doesn't happen. But we've got a calorie management scenario here, and we've got an accounting scenario here too. So if you can only take in so many calories, then having donuts, although you might not slow your glycogen replenishment, probably you might shoot your calories for the day. Sure. Very, 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 very much. And there is something to say that the protein timing literature isn't very strong, and a lot of that is I think because it's been done with untrained individuals. The meta-analysis and review that Brad Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon did way back when, it didn't really show any effect, but I think they had 23 studies and only 4 of those were with trained individuals in that meta-analysis. So there's limitations there, but you want to make sure you've got your protein. You want to make sure you've got your carbs, and fats are not going to impair the glycogen restoration, but how many calories are you going to take in that day? And how are you going to space that out is mainly the question that you have. If you're someone who just doesn't care and you're just like your power lifter, you just want to go for it, then you can just mash down the food. But if you're someone who's trying to keep with some sort of a nutrient cap or a calorie cap, then fats are probably not your best friend. Plus, if you're trying to gain a lot of weight and you're trying to use a nutrient timing approach, as we said before, the fats are going to slow digestion. So you can get really, really full really, really quickly if you have a high-fat meal, whereas the carbs will be absorbed much more rapidly. So that's kind of the answer there. I think, the thing is, one of the things that, like, if you look at dietary systems, like everything from keto to Weight Watchers to whatever, it's adherence that's the main thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Like I don't know exactly how Weight Watchers works, but Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers, they have systems. They have, there's all these like different kind of accounting. The easier it is for you to do, the easier the rule. Like the keto is wonderful. Just don't eat carbs.
Yeah, exactly.
You're doing pretty good. Like your protein might be too high, and technically you're not eating keto if you're not eating a clinical ketogenic diet if you have too much protein, but you just avoid the carbs. Just read the carbs on the label and you're good to go. Like, you're fine. Yeah. Unless there's something mysterious in there. That's a really simple way to bolster adherence and keep things easy to do. So a nutrient timing approach where we know that we're going to get the most bang for buck in terms of insulin, which has a multitude of positive effects on recovery, restoration of glycogen, inhibition of protein breakdown, contributing to anabolism in a very powerful way. We're going to get the more insulin from protein and carbs than we are from fat. Although some you get some really good insulin releases from stuff like donuts.
Oh,
and
for
like
sure.
cakes. Yeah, the insulin index is pretty high.
Yeah.
I would love to see someone, because one of the things that's really interesting is that milk protein and the whey component in particular, because of its amino acid composition, has a really powerful insulin secretagogue effect. It causes really high insulin release. And milk does that. Like if you look at the glycemic index of milk, which has lactose in it, it doesn't have this huge glycemic index, but you have a huge insulin index, and that's because of the protein. Yeah. I really wonder if you had if Dunkin' Donuts made like a whey protein enhanced donut, if you would get any more insulin from that, you know. I don't have a way to measure insulin, but what's that?
It would be interesting. We could actually talk about this alongside our Jiminy Cricket prototype. We could like a milk-based donuts with a high insulin spiking anabolism.
Well, the insulin bombs.
Donuts.
Yeah, insulin bombs is what John Meadows calls his pancakes, you know. So there's something to that, you know, adding some whey in there. Anyway, so that's kind of an aside that the really fatty food, and some of that can be a cephalic type of insulin release too. It's like, oh my God, you're salivating. Like literally that's really good. So your body is anticipating that it's going to have a need to deposit and store a lot of nutrients because it's got this unbelievably yummy morsel placed in front of it. Sure. But that's also, you also can pretty much, when you've got a situation, and this all comes down to caloric balance. So I'm not falling, you know, into the sort of the insulin myth here, but you've also got a scenario where that's actually, I can argue both sides of the coin. The insulin doesn't necessarily, the fats don't necessarily impair glycogen restoration, but you can pretty much ensure that those fats eaten at that time are probably going to be stored as fat.
For sure, yeah.
And if your calories are equal over the course of time into the future, then your fat balance will be your fat balance. And eventually, though, you know, it's not like all of a sudden those fat calories are going to just stay there, even if you have a caloric deficit otherwise. Like they're somehow magically stuck in the fat cells. If there's a negative fat balance thereafter, then eventually that will manifest and the fat will come out. Maybe not the same fatty acids, but it's not like you've irreparably stored that fat in the fat cells by having that fat then. However, I would much rather have that fat if I'm taking in big meals post-workout to get insulin and have restoration of glycogen on another day when I'm not training.
Yeah.
So I can have a steak instead of chicken, for instance.
That's very true.
Right. Yeah. Or salmon would probably be a better choice instead of tilapia.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, thins the skin, so depending on how far away.
Right.
We forgot that.
Yes, I know. Bro, come on, keep me on track here. What are we doing? So that's the reason not to have the fats. Then maybe there's some more insulin there, but you know, there's a dose response to insulin. I think you know, if that's a whole other body of literature that insulin is mainly permissive in terms of amino acid metabolism and protein synthesis, whereas there's at least a little bit of evidence suggesting that higher insulin levels will promote protein synthesis as long as you have enough amino acids there. So I don't know that the fat is helping in any way other than making stuff taste better. And you can have some really tasty stuff that's low fat in that period. So I'd much rather have the fat at another time. And it's just a simple way to account for things. It's just easy. Yeah. Keep the fat low, make sure we got the carbs and the protein there, and then the fats can be had at other times of the day. And that's nutrient timing just from a practical standpoint, irregardless of any physiological effect it may have. So that's a reason to avoid the fats there. is so you can get the
What
carbs
about
in.
the study that you were talking about using milk as opposed to a different form? I'm trying to remember the actual study who did it. There was another study that did it where post-workout they used milk, and they also used whole eggs as opposed to egg whites or just like a solid protein source. Now, both the full-fat milk and the whole eggs had a better MPS response that actually remained elevated for longer as opposed to the lower fat examples. But it was only whole eggs and whole milk. When they used different fat derivatives, it didn't have the same response, even combined with protein sources. So do you think that there is some kind of scientific evidence that can actually say because obviously fat slows down the digestive tract, do you think that if you actually combine that with something along the lines of a whey protein or a full fat milk or whatever and have a higher fat content in that post-workout meal, it would keep the MPS response and the insulin response higher and elevated for longer rather than kind of having a big spike and then dipping down?
I don't know that I know of that. I like the idea of that study. They compared whole egg with whole milk protein, or was it whole milk with the fats in it? And then you said there's another.
It was full fat milk, and I think it was full fat milk compared to skimmed milk. So the one with no fat in it, but it still had the same kind of protein balance. Actually, the skim milk has more carbohydrates in it because of the higher lactase effect. So they compared those two, and then they compared whole eggs with egg whites. And the ones with the
four groups in that study. Oh, I have to see that. I haven't seen that one.
I think I'll have to try and dig it out. I'm trying to rack my brains of the guy who did it. We were actually talking about it in a Facebook group as well called Abbreviated Training. We were talking about this particular study, so I will find it and I'll send you the link because that was a really interesting one. But other fat sources, like say for example, if you actually combined a whey concentrate but then had almond butter or peanut butter and just did it in a shake, it didn't have the same response as opposed to just whole milk or just whole eggs. It was an interesting study.
I have seen a comparison of egg whites and whole eggs and looking at myofibrillary protein synthesis. And you get, if you're looking at the area under the curve for MPS, you're going to get a greater area under the curve.
Okay.
And that has to do with, I think what you're kind of getting at is the time course of elevation of amino acids is prolonged.
Yeah, that's it.
This is the idea of fast versus slow proteins that's been out. So whey versus casein, for instance.
Yeah.
So the study was like, it's decades old now. I think it was maybe 99. Bourrie was the first one to kind of coin that term of fast and slow proteins. And they just looked at casein using an overnight model, and they compared casein and whey. And whey protein, you get this fairly rapid spike. 2 hours, I think, or so afterwards, you get a spike and to come back down. So you get an elevated protein synthesis that's over and done with 3 or 4 hours after you've taken in the whey, whereas the casein comes in more slowly, and you have prolonged protein synthesis over the course of hours and hours. So that's part of it. Only thing I can think of, I have to see the study. It'd be interesting to see what they have to say. But if you're matching protein grams and you're using almond butter. In whey, then some of the protein in the almonds is not going to be as high of quality as the whey. So you may have cut back on the essential amino acid, the branched chain amino acid content. If let's say you take, a tablespoon of almond butter with 13 or 14 grams of fat in it, and you got like 6 grams of protein or something like that, and you try to match that with the whole milk, you may end up with, let's say, 2 tablespoons, or let's say you have 10 grams of almond butter, protein from almond butter, replacing animal sourced protein, egg or milk based. So now your protein quality has gone down. And I don't know how those fats would compare in terms of release into the gastrointestinal system.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because you do have to think about the bioavailability of the protein source that you are taking, because that is going to make a difference to your MPS response.
Yeah, I mean, there's bioavailability. Which is going to be high. It's going to be 90+% bioavailable, and that it's absorbed. But then there's the biological value, or the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, which will be a little bit less. So that's related to bioavailability. the quality of the protein is just going to be less in a plant-based source.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why people will just say almond butter, it's just fat. Like, don't even count those grams of protein because it's not animal-based. It's so poor, relatively speaking.
Yeah, complete job, isn't it? So
yeah, and then there's the insulin thing. Which of those tasted better? Here's kind of the bottom line. I really love to have seen the individual data, and I love to see the study to see what the variability is. It's an interesting study that I referenced in one of the talks that I give, where they compared white bread and maltodextrin in terms of glycemic index.
Yeah.
And they actually have a page where they show all the individual glucose response curves for the individual subjects for both conditions. Yeah. They're all over the place.
Yeah, because people respond to different things at different times and different measures. Yeah.
Well, it's a matter of the person and their genetics, and probably it could even be a matter of how their fed state. I think, like, this as well as I do. I'd love to see someone look into this. You're dieted down and you're like a wolf. You can smell everything. Every odor coming from every restaurant is drawing you near it. Like, right? Yeah. If you want to eat everything, like, I opened a bag of dog food like last month and I'm like, that smells really good. I want to eat some of that. I literally was about ready. I'm like, no, I can't. That's my dog's food.
That's so funny.
It's high quality. So you're gonna have a differential insulin response, and of course your insulin sensitivity is also different. So that's going to change, the biofeedback involved with controlling glucose levels appropriately, depending on where you are in diet phase.
Sure.
But there's just the individuals, and the microbiome actually plays a role here too. They've done there's a study with like 800 participants, where they looked at the microbiome and they were able to look at the bacterial colonies in terms of predicting with some pretty good resolution what the glycemic index was of a test meal based on the gut. So the state of affairs in your gut, and how to manipulate that in your favor, I don't know. I don't think science really knows that quite yet, but there's definitely something going on there. So you compare a yummy milk drink with maybe what could have been a bland, kind of odd tasting almond whey protein drink, and literally some of them like, do I need to drink this?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is awful. Like, this is really good. I really like this yummy milkshake thing you gave me, but this clumpy almond thing is not my favorite. So I don't know if they matched fatty acids as well. That's a possibility.
Possibly. I'd have to get it out again. It's been a while since I actually read the full study. It just kind of popped up when we were talking about that. Then I was thinking, okay, that might have been it. But yeah, very interesting. It is.
So that's the comparison of fat sources, essentially, is whether is the different fatty acids and whether the mono, poly, or fully saturated. That's the big deal. There's a nice review paper that Jose Antonio has come out with, another author. I can't remember his name. He's the first author. I think must have been a graduate student, maybe, of his. Hopefully I didn't. Maybe he's not. Maybe it's just a colleague. But they looked at basically the effects of overfeeding of protein, carbohydrates, and fats.
Yes.
And saturated fat tends to fare worse than other forms of fat in terms of putting on the body fat.
Definitely.
So,
and yet you can overfeed protein without any kind of effect into your body weight, body mass, body composition.
Pretty much, based on what he's shown. Yeah, there's a study that came out not too long ago too, looking sort of they'd kind of a microarray analysis to see which genes are turned on by protein overfeeding. You do turn on some of the genes of fatty of triglyceride storage with excess protein. It's not like a complete freebie. But it's definitely more difficult because of the thermogenic effect of eating protein to put protein into body fat. So
very interesting.
There's something there. So
we can talk about these kind of things for hours. This is why I love talking to Scott so much, because we can geek out and just kind of be like, oh, I need to see that study, and then I need to see this study. So it's really But obviously we've been talking for such a long time now. So just to kind of wrap this up beautifully, as we always do, Scott, what would you say is the most important take-home message for nutrient timing and specifically for bodybuilders?
Ideally, in some way, shape, or form, you have nutrients available pre, during, and after your workout. That can be in the form of a meal that you've eaten that allows you to comfortably train with a relatively empty stomach. Or that could be in the form of a pre-workout that sits well with you, that makes you feel better while you're training and not worse. Or that could be in the form of that sort of multitasking strategy where you literally make your workout into a meal.
Yeah.
At the same time, especially if you're trying to pack on the food. So there seems to be something to having that. And the relative importance of that is going to depend on how you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's elsewhere, literally what your goals are, how close you are to sort of maximizing your genetic potential. There's a law of diminishing returns here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for some people, you know, whether or not they eat their drink during that, you've probably seen there's a funny YouTube video where a guy is literally, I think he forgot his post-workout drink, and like they show him like frantically driving home to get his drink, like it's like he's gonna lose all of his gains.
Completely.
Yeah, he's gonna miss the window, right? So like for some people it may make absolutely no difference whatsoever, because they're going out on the weekends and they're splurging, or they're drinking, or their sleep is awful, and they've got many other things that are more important priority wise than the nutrient timing. I have in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach a nutritional hierarchy of needs, basically, and like calories is at the bottom, macronutrients and water is the next step up, etc. And nutrient timing is very, very much near the top. So it's not like you can remedy things that are more important with a nutrient timing approach, but it does make sense to be fed, so to speak, around your workout in some way, shape, or form. Protein first, I would say carbohydrates second, and fats being definitely last on the list of priorities. So
amazing. Absolutely love it. So I'm pretty sure that all of the viewers will want you to come back on, because they always do. Our videos and our podcasts always have fun. Guys, if you haven't actually seen the video of me and Scott training at Ultimate Fitness in Birmingham, that was so much fun. So much fun. With Scott traveling, we actually just did 2 complete training sessions completely based around muscle rounds, didn't we? And one of Yeah, we did that. It's on YouTube, so people can go and watch it. It's on the same channel. One of my most favorite muscle rounds that we did do was a single leg extension muscle round. Jesus Christ. And I still kind of implement that every now and again, just when I want to be sadistic and when I miss Scott so much. It's just like, do you know what? We'll do that for the shits and the giggles.
Yeah, they're brutal. That like a Romanian split squat muscle round.
That's horrible.
Those are that's one of the toughest ones. Or like a lunge, a single leg lunge where you do 4 4 4 4 4. Literally, you just go and go and go. That's just about as hard as it gets.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. I do those on a Smith machine. So it's just a static lunge on a muscle round on the Smith machine. Jesus Christ, that's horrible. But it's great. Yes. We're not putting people off doing muscle rounds. You know, Fortitude Training is pretty damn good. So
yes.
You know that. So
you have to love to train hard, and it forces you to. So I've had no one complain who does it. People love it.
Oh yeah,
people really love it because you get to choose.
Complain whilst they're doing it, but afterwards they're like, "Shit, that was a really good workout," and I really love it. So everybody go and check out Fortitude Training, as you always, well, you probably all have done right now, but as Scott alluded to earlier on, he has got a new book out, which is called Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. So you can go ahead and purchase that now. I'll put the link underneath the comments as per usual. And as per usual as well, guys, if you've got any questions for myself or the amazing Dr. Scott Stevenson, then please obviously slide into my DMs. Don't slide into Scott's, because you're just going to mither him too much, or put the comments in the box underneath the YouTube video, and we'll be happy to answer them as and when we get round to them. So Scott, a pleasure as always. Lots of love, and I will catch up with you very, very soon, I hope.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thank you so much, Vicky. I love it.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.